Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Zach Finch, as ever, joined by my wonderful co-host, Gregory Elliott, during this festive Christmas period. How you doing, mate?
Oh yeah, I'm alright, mate. I'm just about woken up from that nap of a game. And,
To be fair, after how busy your last couple of days have been, mate, you probably needed it.
yeah, it sure is Christmas.
It really is, and I think that's where some of that can be lost in between. You know, I know Sky are calling it like football dartsmas or whatever it is, but for Southampton fans, I think it's all about our new manager, Mr. Ivan Juric. So yesterday, on Saturday, whenever we are at this point, Saturday. Whenever Saturday was, we finally had the confirmation that he will be our manager for supposedly the next 18 months, signed on an 18-month contract. He wants not possession space football. He wants aggressive football with a high press. He has watched tons of our games apparently and can instantly see where he can sort of make changes. And after what I can call a game that about half of it I spent staring at Craven Cottage's big posts that hold up their roof, thinking that must be a nightmare to try and sit behind that. That says everything you need to know about the game. But he also watched that game, and I think that we saw a couple of times, Greg, how frustrated he was at where we're at.
So I guess hard to tell at the end of the game whether that picture was just frustration at the lack of going forward or just bewilderment at Toolpool in general.
It's one of those things where, like, coming from sort of a couple of years in a similar sort of situation for Torino to turning around and making him great, a couple of months at Roma that didn't really pan out too well, to sort of another project where he's got to try and get us out of an issue with a shoestring budget. I do wonder if he's realised what he signed up for watching us today, because I think it's very different.
We had a couple of clips of him texting. How much do you think he was involved in any of the decisions today?
I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted
that starting lineup.
That starting lineup surprised me, right? Because the starting lineup, I think we were kind of all right with most of it, bar the Armstrong decision, which seemed just a bit left field. And I think I discussed it the other day, I think, in our crossover. But then when we did the preview, when you asked me to pick an 11, I didn't have him anywhere near it. I thought maybe he'll come back in, maybe he'll come back on the left. I didn't think he would come in as our sort of sole striker, and it didn't really pan out. So maybe he made some of those decisions.
Strange decision to me, because we saw on Wednesday that Cameron Archer has the ability to play as that isolated striker and continue to give the defence questions and ask them questions, even without a huge amount of service. And let's be honest, today there was zero service, even if Adam Armstrong played to the best of his abilities. But what Adam Armstrong brings is a completely different kettle of fish, because he is more happy to drop deep and receive the ball deeper. But actually what it led to is, on several occasions, he was back almost in a holding midfield role, and we booted the ball up the pitch, and then he's already 10 yards behind.
Yeah, like even my wife, who, bless her, sat with me, and I say watched it, she paid no attention because she was, quite frankly, there was nothing really to pay much attention to. But even she, she did,
we had a shot on target.
The time she did glance up was sort of like, I was trying to point out to her, I was like, you see the number 9 over there? Yeah, the one that's right back there. He should be all the way up there. So when we do pass it up, but then obviously it didn't really feel like that kind of game. So yeah, it seemed like an odd decision, but also it could be as simple as fitness, because we've got had a game Wednesday, game today, got another game coming up midweek, and we got another game at the weekend. It's a really jam-packed schedule. So maybe Archer wasn't feeling up for it, but I think everyone, even the commentators on Sky, were talking about that he must be feeling a little hard done by if the decision was anything to do with form or tactical direction, because it was.
And then we put him on in the second half. We ripped Diblin off, and instead of playing him in that position to start with, where he'd shown so much strength in the week against Liverpool, we started him further out wide, where he struggled to get in on the game at all until about 20 minutes into the second half, when we then sort of shifted it and put Armour out on the left instead, and then decided to play Archer through the middle. And but it's so hard to judge because you can only watch what he's doing off the ball so much. But when you can't get the ball out of your own half out to him, yeah, it was a tricky one. It was just a bit of a nothing game, wasn't it?
You said historically these games kind of not a lot happens. I decided to vote against that in our predictions. I was horrifically wrong. I think the positives immediately to take from it, though, is that regardless of how boring it was a clean sheet.
Yeah.
If we'd done that every game so far, we would not have a lot of points, but we'd have more points than we have now.
Right, look, you have to take the positive that we have 20% more points than we did at the start of the day, which is in itself a depressing stat, isn't it?
There's quite a few depressing stats in that game, and I think that, like, I remember I didn't spiral and have a meltdown the first half, but I know that our texting back and forth was just I think my frustrations of the last couple of weeks boiled over because I really enjoyed watching the Liverpool game, and watching that game was just, it's like paint drying would be more interesting. But then also that was down to the fact that kind of Fulham didn't play their best game and probably had more than a few opportunities to put the game to bed, but they never really seemed like they were going to. And whenever we have the ball in the final third, it's like we either do way too
I know
much
what I'm
of it
doing
too
this far up the
quickly.
pitch, better turn around and pass it backwards.
Yeah, but it's not even that. It's like they're almost scared to take a shot on ever.
Yeah.
And that includes
Maybe
everybody.
that's a
Only sort of,
hangover from Martin Ball.
yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the things that has to change. And I think it's going to be whichever striker adapts to that the most quick that will probably get those opportunities, And I guess we'll just have to see because, we're going to have a January transfer window coming up with the new manager in. He has already discussed he wants to sort of sort us out defensively. Classic Saints is being linked with one of our previous defenders, Kevin Danso, who you might remember a little bit, who played, an Austrian, played on the Haslett a short amount, didn't really have a huge amount of opportunities, went away from us and played really, really well. I'd find it baffling for him to come back, or anyone would really want to come back at the moment with the state that we're in.
I know, mate. I think there were still positives to take defensively from the game today. Nathan Wood, I think, had a really good game, and I think has really stepped up well, since he's been brought into the team. Harwood Bellis just seemed to be everywhere in the back line. He seemed to be getting in the way of just about everything Fulham tried. So,
Well,
there are still holes that we need to plug, but it feels
it's
like we're
never going to
getting
change
there.
overnight, and you said it time and time again before that it never was everything to do with Russell Martin. There's a lot more going on than I think that needs to be looked at than just the manager and the style of play. And I think that those things will start to come into fruition with our new manager. So after the break, we'll have a discussion about some of the substitutions, some more individual personnel, because there's not really a lot else to talk about in the game apart from the one or two chances we had. So without further ado, here is a word from our partners at Zencastr.
Yeah, so here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr.
Wonderful. So we are back. Some of the you've already mentioned, like the first sort of substitution that we saw today, which was Tyler Dibbling off for Archer. Interesting one, that one. Is it because he's young and he's played a lot recently? Is it that he wasn't really doing a lot for us? What do you think? You worried about that
Yeah,
one?
no, I'm not
Or
particularly worried. I think it's just a case of, like you say, managing minutes. We've got a lot of games coming up. He's very young. We don't want to be burnt by something that we've been burnt by before. And yeah, he had quite a good first half, not the best he's had, and it just goes back to the tendency we've noticed before from him, where he just tries to do maybe one too many things every time he's on the ball. And I think actually I said it to you as we were talking back and forth in the game that it's actually almost the blessing and the curse of his confidence, right? Because his confidence is what drives him to that in the game and what brings him as the sort of shining star of the team that drags the team forward because that's what he wants to do. But also, it's that same confidence that makes him think that he's the best player to take this on when sometimes he just needs to release the ball half a second earlier.
yeah, that is, I think, we get a lot of conversation from all across the board about how amazing he is, and he is a really, really good talent. I think he still needs some time to mature, and I do wonder those sort of big clubs could just leave him with us for a while to get to that level of maturity, please, before you decide to pay 75 million, get immediately annoyed that he doesn't score you 10 goals in a season, and then loan him out to a League One club. But that'll be that. We also saw Big Legs make his reappearance today. He was on for Joe Aribo, who I think you pointed out was a bit anonymous today and didn't really have the best game, but not the worst either. Just sort of, he was there.
Yeah, but then that can be said for any number of players on both teams, to be honest. It was just a little bit anonymous, a little bit hidden. But yeah, I think it was fine. I think he came on and actually he looked solid. He looked fine. He also drove the ball forward a few times. He didn't really make the same sort of mistakes we've seen from him. But I think, like I said on the episode about the new manager, or maybe the episode about Russell Martin being gone, it's kind of a clean slate at this point, right? Because you can't tell where the shortcomings of a player that we've seen on the pitch have been down to him trying to adjust to a system he doesn't like, or actual player weaknesses. We're not going to be able really to deduce that until 2 or 3 weeks of seeing them play. But I still see the promise there, and yeah, I'm sure he'll have a part to play.
For me, that I think has probably been slightly more critical than you on Big Les. I think he did a good job today, and I think he was one of the few players that actually got the ball forward. He had one move where I think he just literally ran out of football field, but there were a couple of times where he did probably more than some of the others on the pitch to actually get the ball up there. So that was good to see. We had the reverse of the substitution last week where Sugawara came off for James Bree, and I don't know if that just seems to be sort of pre-agreed conversations with Simon Russ to give them both the same amount of minutes because they're kind of interchangeable, or what? Because it seemed really strange that like for like last week and like for like again.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense. They play the same position, but admittedly in slightly different ways. Like Yuki's far more interested in going forward than defending, although he did some defensive work today just fine. James Breed is the more solid traditional style fullback that you'd expect. I think Yuki had a fine game. He was on a booking, which probably might play into it as well. It might just be a case of seeing that there was danger coming down that side, and maybe Yuki had maybe fresh legs was what was needed. But
well, yeah, Wobie played really, really, really well. I think he was their biggest threat the entire game, and if it was coming, it was probably coming down that side.
It was either him or Adama Traore who just seemed to play out of his skin when he came on. It was crazy.
That was slightly upsetting. But we managed to hold it off. So I think that's a credit to the lads for actually being able to do that, because previously I don't think that would have been the case. We had a couple of hairy moments, but our last sort of sub that we had was we finally got our wish of a Archer tall pool for all of about 4 minutes without the service. So
yeah, I don't know.
Actually was on the pitch.
Certainly was. I don't think he touched the ball, but then I think the substitution literally took place in the 90th minute. So
it did, and then we had back to back corners, which
that's right. We did nothing with.
Did nothing really. I was
hopeful. They said early in the game when we had a corner, Saints are yet to score from a corner this season, and that registered in my brain. Some things don't. And then it came back to late in the game, and I think in the 83rd minute we had a corner. I'm like, oh, maybe that was foreshadowing. Maybe we're going to get something good here, and that just didn't really happen.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of the game that was like that, but I think that's just a very by the stats, it is very much a Fulham Southampton type of game for things like that to happen. Like, I think if anything was going to happen, it was going to be a moment of magic, and it just didn't materialize from either side. And with us, I'm not really surprised, because the confidence in the players is low. From Fulham, they were missing some of their key personnel. What I would refer to as the Arsenal boys, all of whom used to play for Arsenal, all seem to be missing today, either through injury or suspension. They tried to bring on their talisman who scores against us quite often, which is Raul Jimenez, who managed to not score this game, which was quite nice. So yeah, we've had a bit of a weird game and it's been hard to talk about for us because it's not been a huge amount. But there's a couple of other things that we've got on the agenda in part 2 or part 3 before sort of our final thoughts on the game. We'll also talk about the return of Aaron Ramsdale because he was back in the squad. So, yeah, it's all good. And now a word from our partners at the Global Sports Podcast Network. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. So yeah, obviously, as I said, there's not been a massive amount for us to talk about this game. It's been exciting news with the new manager coming in. The new manager has been able to sort of see where we're at. But a couple other things we kind of missed off. Aaron Ramsdale was back between the sticks, mate. No more 3rd/4th choice goalkeeper.
Yeah.
We had our
Just 4
primary keeper
fingers
back.
instead.
Yeah, so pterodactyl hand in it. That was bizarre. But yeah, it was nice to have him back. I say that some of his distribution today, I stopped counting after about 10 when he'd kicked it out for a Fulham throw-in. I don't know why he kept trying to hit sort of that left-hand side, but he was never hitting it.
Look, okay, it is what it is, right? The goal kicks were shocking, but I think I said it before. If he's gonna have shocking distribution and kick it out of play, at least he's kicking out of play in their half instead of on the edge of our box where we're going to concede a goal. And it's fine. It's going to happen. It's going to take him a while, I think, to get back into it. I guess my main concern, apart from that, was with his special gloves. Is it a case of coming back too early and pushing himself? Because is it going to come back to haunt us if he re-injures himself and he has to have another series of games out at what's going to be a much more important part of the season?
I think if they've taken all of those precautions and they originally expected him to be back for Spurs and they've put it off by a week, I think that it might just be an overabundance of caution. And at least that's what I hope. Like, he had surgery on it quite quickly. That seems to have healed up. I much prefer him in a goalkeeper's kit than doing punditry during the game where his manager at the time was fired.
What
The guy that literally went out of his way
in
to.
hindsight, what an awful thing to agree to.
I
What an
I,
awful
I
position to be put in.
absolutely. I still cannot understand how that was allowed from both the club, the broadcaster, the
It's just
player himself,
naivety
and
from the
management.
club. That's all it is. There's no
Nuts.
way they
Like,
saw it playing out that way, and that in itself is insane.
well, yeah, but that says a lot more than you want about how well planned the last couple of weeks have been.
But actually, having him goal paid off. He made a couple of really good big saves. I think he made one save that was going in,
Still quite incisive,
and
though.
a couple of touches on shots that weren't shots that could have been called crosses. So that's how nothing the game was, though. It's just those are the fine margins, right? If one of them creeps in the back post when it's supposed to be a cross, it's a different story. So
you said to me before, if Rambo was in goal, would that make a difference? Do you reckon we would have lost if McCarthy or Lumley were in the goal, or do you reckon it was that nothing that it would have been a
probably
problem?
one of them would have passed it to Iwobi directly at some point, almost inevitably. So
what do we do? Because we've kind of shown that our 3rd and 4th choice goalkeepers are not sort of where we want them to be. Bazunu's still out injured, but I guess will be our 2nd. Do we
he
pick
should be
someone up in
back as
January?
soon as January, right? I think that I've heard
Supposedly.
that that's sort of the timescale you'd expect for his injury. I don't know. That's a tricky one. With January, spending is frankly going to be limited. It's probably not going to be able to spend until we see players go out the door. Do
But
we
do you
want to
not see
spend money
potentially
on a
Lumley
backup
going out?
goalkeeper?
That was more to my point. Like, at this point, he was brought in under Russell Martin, supposedly to play second fiddle to Bazunu. He gets that opportunity in the championship, but that's thrown away because they decide to start McCarthy. He only gets his opportunity this year because McCarthy ends up injured. He puts an all right account of himself, but then gets kind of thrown under the bus a little bit because it's like, oh well, all the fans were saying kick it out, so he kicked out, and then he conceded. But now I'm just like, if Bazunu's back, and then you've got Ramsdale and McCarthy, who's admittedly, I think he only signed a 12-month deal, right? Is he going to stay, or if you're him, do you go, I think now might be a time for me to move on?
I don't know. I just don't know if that moves the needle much in the way of money coming in or out. To be honest,
Probably not, to be fair.
you'd have
But
to pay.
it's interesting. There's a
You'd
lot
have
of
to pay
players that
someone
like
to
that.
scrap him. Like I don't know. He
I
seems
think
to be he seems to be good around the dressing room and have a positive impact. And I guess it wonders how much of an impact that has on the decision making of our incoming manager, who I don't think maybe it's quite as high on his priority list as it was on Martin's to create that kind of atmosphere. Is maybe a diplomatic way of putting it. So I don't know.
Proud of you,
I
mate.
don't know have the answers, but it feels like, especially with Baz coming back from injury at some point, that maybe our money would be better spent somewhere else. Someone who knows where the goal is, the other end of the pitch, perhaps.
I can't help but feel with some of the substitutions today and watching us play, and if the new manager did have some sort of influence over what's gone on today, I can't help but feel that time is up in January for some people at the club.
Definitely.
And that's the kind of vibe. And like, I will point out that we did not see Cornet either in the matchday squad or the subs, and I don't know if he's still about or not at this point. So
I don't know.
interesting.
It certainly wasn't saving him for Boxing Day because we're playing his parent club, so he's unavailable for selection.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sure
that's
that
what I mean.
really matters in the decision-making process at this point. I don't know.
It's been an interesting.
Speaks
I was always
volumes.
fascinated by the team selection of these last two games, and I was always going to be. I don't really know how much it's told us, and I don't know how much influence today's had. But we will finish this game up, mate, with the fact that we ended up without losing. We didn't win, but we got a draw, so that's a point on the board, which is one more point than we had yesterday.
It's a clean sheet.
And we got a clean sheet for the first time in what feels like 100 years.
Everton, I think.
Goodness gracious me, that's upsetting. So we go into our first home game under the new manager, if his work permit is, of course, passed by that point, with some sort of positives.
Home office is shut for Christmas now. It might take a minute.
That depends. Maybe they can pay to get up the chain. But either way, we go into
knowing how tight our board is, that envelope's been sent. They've missed the Christmas cut-off.
Right, well, with all of that fun, thank you for joining us today. The Fulham match review. We've got obviously a busy festive period coming up. We're going to have probably still content coming out, mainly because we've got the West Ham game coming up on Boxing Day. So thank you very much for listening, first and foremost, to old listeners and new. Catch us on all of the social medias, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, all that fun stuff. And once again, thank you very much for listening today, and we will see you in the next one.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.